She was fired for helping a homeless man. An hour later, he returned in a limo to buy the place. The silence in the opulent reception area of the Gilded Hearth was thick, almost suffocating, broken only by the nervous shuffling of feet and the faint, tinny echo of a distant city. Wallace Breen, regional manager, stood rigid, his meticulously tailored suit a stark contrast to the disheveled figure seated casually on one of the plush velvet armchairs. Wallace's face, usually a mask of controlled composure, was now a canvas of barely contained rage and utter disbelief. He had just heard the most preposterous declaration of his life, a statement so audacious it seemed to defy the very laws of reality within his carefully constructed domain. Wallace, a man whose life revolved around order, control, and the ruthless pursuit of profit, could not, would not, process the words that had just been uttered. "You can't be serious," Wallace sneered, his voice dripping with condescension, each syllable laced with a venomous disdain. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, now burned with a mixture of indignation and pure contempt. "This is the Gilded Hearth, our flagship boutique hotel. A jewel in the crown of Montgomery Holdings, where every detail, every guest, every surface, exudes unparalleled luxury and exclusivity. You think you can just waltz in here, smelling of the streets, of forgotten corners and stale desperation, and make demands? This isn't some charity shelter, old man. This isn't a soup kitchen for the unfortunate. This is an establishment of the highest caliber, reserved for a discerning clientele. Get out before I have security physically remove you, and believe me, they will not be gentle." Wallace's words were a wall, designed to crush, to intimidate, to assert his absolute dominion over this space. He saw only an unsightly stain, a challenge to his pristine, profit-driven world. The old man, Silas Montgomery, merely offered a faint, almost imperceptible smile. It was a smile that held no humor, only a profound, knowing quietude, hinting at a truth far grander and more devastating than Wallace could ever imagine. His once ragged clothes, the ones he had worn just yesterday, had been replaced by a suit that, though understated in its dark charcoal hue, bespoke an unmistakable quality, a silent testament to masterful tailoring and the finest fabrics that even Wallace, in his blind arrogance and superficial understanding of wealth, would instinctively recognize as superior. The gray, unkempt beard, which had served its purpose in his elaborate charade, was now neatly trimmed, revealing a jawline of formidable resolve, a profile that once graced the covers of countless business magazines. His eyes, once downcast and weary in their feigned vulnerability, now held a sharp, knowing glint that promised a reckoning, a profound realignment of power that was already underway. "Oh, but he assures you, Mr. Breen," Silas's voice was calm, resonant, carrying a weight of authority that cut through Wallace's bluster like a finely honed blade, silencing the lingering echoes of his derision. Each word was carefully chosen, delivered with the precision of a master craftsman. "He is entirely serious. In fact, the game, as you so aptly put it, is indeed over. And he is not here to make demands. He is here to close a transaction. A transaction that has been in the making for far longer than you could ever comprehend, Mr. Breen, a transaction that will redefine everything you believe you know." Wallace let out a short, incredulous laugh, a sound devoid of humor, laced instead with pure contempt and a touch of genuine bewilderment. His mind, so accustomed to perceiving the world through the lens of hierarchy and material worth, simply could not reconcile the man before him with the words he spoke. "A transaction? You? What could you possibly buy here? A complimentary glass of water? Perhaps a discarded bread roll from the kitchen? Look around you, old fool. This property, this entire chain of hotels, the Gilded Hearth, the Sapphire Spire, the Emerald Enclave, every single one, is owned by Montgomery Holdings. Unless you've suddenly materialized a fortune from under a park bench, unless you've discovered a hidden cache of gold coins in some forgotten alleyway, he suggests you cease this ridiculous charade. You're making a spectacle of yourself, and frankly, you're disrupting the very exclusive atmosphere he works so diligently to maintain." Wallace gestured dismissively towards the few shocked employees and lingering guests, who watched the bizarre scene unfold, their hushed whispers barely audible above the hum of the hotel. Wallace's arrogance was a towering wall, impenetrable by reason, built upon years of unearned power and a deeply flawed understanding of true value. He could not, would not, comprehend the monumental shift that was about to shatter his carefully constructed world. He still believed he held all the cards, blissfully unaware that the deck had been stacked against him from the very beginning, by the very man he now so casually insulted. He truly believed he was untouchable, that his authority was absolute. Silas's smile widened, a cold, predatory glint entering his eyes, a glint that had once struck fear into the hearts of cutthroat competitors. He leaned forward slightly, his posture emanating an unshakable power, the quiet confidence of a man who held all the answers, all the leverage. "Montgomery Holdings, you say? How astute of you, Mr. Breen. You are quite right. They do indeed own this establishment. And that, he believes, makes this transaction all the more poetic. Because, you see, he is Silas Montgomery. And he is not buying a place, Mr. Breen. He is buying his place back. The place he built, the legacy he created, which you, and those like you, have so meticulously distorted and debased. And with it, he is buying your future, Mr. Breen. He is buying the future you believed you had, the future you were so certain was yours for the taking." The words hung in the air, each one a hammer blow striking at the foundations of Wallace Breen's carefully constructed reality, a reality about to crumble into dust, leaving nothing but the bitter taste of regret and ruin. The air itself seemed to crackle with the weight of that truth, a truth that Wallace, in his hubris, was utterly unprepared to face. Silas Montgomery had not always been a man consumed by disillusionment. Once, decades ago, he had been a titan of industry driven by an unyielding ambition, a visionary who saw potential where others saw only vacant lots and dilapidated structures. He possessed an uncanny knack for identifying hidden value, for understanding the ebb and flow of urban development. He had built Montgomery Holdings from a single, shrewd real estate investment, a forgotten warehouse district he transformed into a thriving commercial hub, into a sprawling empire encompassing luxury hotels, towering commercial properties, and meticulously planned residential complexes across the globe. His name was synonymous with success, his net worth a figure that defied easy comprehension, spoken of in hushed, reverent tones in boardrooms and financial publications. He had achieved everything he had set out to achieve, and more, accumulating a fortune that placed him among the world's most powerful individuals. He had built a dynasty, a legacy meant to last generations. Yet, with each passing year, as his wealth grew, so too did a gnawing emptiness, a sense of profound disappointment with the very world he had so meticulously crafted. The joy of creation, the thrill of innovation, had slowly been replaced by a pervasive sense of hollowness. He had watched, with a growing sense of despair, as the principles he once valued, hard work, integrity, genuine connection, a commitment to quality and service that transcended mere profit, seemed to erode, replaced by a relentless, soulless pursuit of profit at any cost. Boardrooms, once vibrant spaces of collaborative innovation, became arenas of cutthroat competition, where empathy was seen as a weakness, a liability, and ruthlessness as the paramount virtue. He saw his own employees, once seemingly passionate and dedicated artisans in their fields, transform into automatons obsessed with metrics, KPIs, key performance indicators, and quarterly reports, their eyes devoid of the spark that once ignited innovation and genuine service. He saw managers like Wallace Breen rise through the ranks, not through genuine leadership, inspiring mentorship, or compassionate oversight, but through aggressive, often brutal, cost-cutting measures, an almost pathological aversion to any form of risk, and a chilling disregard for the human element of their businesses. These were the very individuals who, in their ruthless efficiency, were slowly suffocating the soul of the empire he had painstakingly built. His disillusionment reached its zenith after a series of incidents that, individually, might have seemed minor, isolated anomalies, but collectively painted a stark, depressing picture of a corporate culture gone profoundly astray. There was the instance of a beloved, long-serving hotel chef, renowned for his innovative, locally sourced menus, dismissed without ceremony, without even a perfunctory farewell, for using a slightly more expensive, but undeniably superior, locally sourced ingredient that marginally impacted profit margins. Efficiency over excellence, Wallace Breen had famously declared in a regional meeting, a phrase that had curdled Silas's stomach. Then, there was the regional director who proudly reported cutting all charitable contributions from their properties, citing unnecessary expenditure, while simultaneously approving exorbitant bonuses for himself and his direct reports, celebrating their fiscal prudence. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. And most recently, the news of a valued customer service representative being reprimanded, almost fired, for spending too much time assisting an elderly guest with a complex travel issue, a lost passport, a missed flight, a genuine crisis, rather than adhering strictly to call time metrics. Time is money, not empathy, Wallace Breen had allegedly stated when reviewing the incident, a chilling echo of the cold, transactional world Silas found himself inhabiting. Each anecdote chipped away at Silas's faith, leaving him with a bitter taste in his mouth, a sense of profound regret for the monster his empire seemed to have become. The world, it seemed, had transformed into a cold, transactional place, where the bottom line eclipsed all else, where humanity was merely another line item to be optimized or eliminated. Silas, in his twilight years, found himself increasingly isolated by his vast fortune. His grand estates, once filled with laughter and genuine camaraderie, now echoed with a profound emptiness. People approached him with feigned smiles and thinly veiled agendas, their eyes betraying their true intentions. His own executives spoke in carefully crafted platitudes, their words hollow, their intentions transparently self-serving, their loyalty a commodity bought and sold. He yearned for genuine connection, for a glimpse of the unadulterated kindness he felt had vanished from the corporate landscape he had helped create. He wanted to know if the values he cherished, honesty, compassion, integrity, still existed, not in the carefully curated public image of his company, in its glossy brochures and carefully worded mission statements, but in the raw, unvarnished interactions between human beings, stripped of titles and wealth. He needed to know if true decency could still survive in the brutal ecosystem of modern business. It was during one of his solitary evenings, reflecting on the vast emptiness of his grand estate, the silence broken only by the distant hum of the city, that the idea, seemingly outlandish, began to take root. He would become invisible. He would strip away the layers of his wealth and power, shed the imposing persona of Silas Montgomery, the titan of industry, and simply become another face in the crowd, a face often ignored, dismissed, or worse, scorned. He would disguise himself as a down-on-his-luck, elderly man, frail and unassuming, someone who would test the very fabric of human decency. He would walk among them, his own employees, his own properties, and observe. He would see who truly saw him, who offered a hand without expectation of reward, and who dismissed him as an inconvenience, a stain on their pristine, profit-driven facade. He would put his empire to the ultimate test. The plan was meticulously crafted, executed with the same precision he applied to his most complex business deals. He instructed his most trusted, longest-serving assistant, a stoic woman named Eleanor Vance, whose loyalty was beyond question, to prepare a series of disguises, convincing enough to pass scrutiny, yet simple enough to avoid drawing undue attention. Eleanor, a woman of immense discretion and unwavering dedication, understood the profound importance of his mission. He spent weeks studying the mannerisms of the marginalized, the way they carried themselves, the quiet dignity that often went unnoticed, the subtle shifts in posture and gaze that conveyed vulnerability. He researched the specific properties he wished to visit, focusing on those managed by individuals like Wallace Breen, who embodied the very ruthlessness Silas had come to despise, the very antithesis of the values he once held dear. He wanted to catch them in their natural habitat, unvarnished, unpretentious, believing themselves to be above reproach, their true characters exposed in the absence of accountability. He craved the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might be, no matter how much it might shatter his remaining illusions. His first few forays were disheartening, each one a fresh wound to his fragile hope. He encountered indifference, thinly veiled contempt, and outright cruelty. He was shooed away from public benches by security guards, ignored by staff in luxury stores he himself owned, and once, even had a cup of coffee intentionally spilled near him by a disgruntled barista, who muttered about loiterers. He remembered walking for hours, the biting wind cutting through his thin coat, feeling the profound loneliness of being truly invisible, truly insignificant in the eyes of the world. Each incident reinforced his cynical view, the bitter truth that the world he had helped create had become a cold, unforgiving place. Yet, it also fueled his resolve. He knew that if he kept looking, if he truly stripped away his identity, he would eventually find the light amidst the encroaching darkness. He believed that somewhere, amidst the concrete and glass, the profit margins and the endless pursuit of more, there still existed a flicker of genuine humanity, a spark of empathy that could not be extinguished by corporate mandates or the lure of personal gain. And he would find it. He had to. For his own peace of mind, and for the future of the empire he had built, an empire he now realized needed a profound recalibration of its values, a return to the very soul it had lost. Silas, now known only as Arthur in his carefully constructed persona, shuffled into the grand lobby of the Gilded Hearth. His clothes were threadbare, a faded, oversized coat struggling to conceal the thinness of his frame, its worn fabric smelling faintly of old books and damp city air. A worn beanie, pulled low, covered his once distinguished gray hair, and a pair of thick-rimmed glasses, slightly askew, completed the illusion of a man weathered by life's harsh realities, someone whom the world had forgotten. He carried a small, battered duffel bag, its contents undoubtedly meager, a symbol of his supposed homelessness. He moved slowly, deliberately, his gait conveying the weariness of age and circumstance, the subtle aches and pains of a life lived hard. He chose this worn, distressed appearance, not to evoke pity, for pity was fleeting and superficial, but to provoke a genuine reaction, to force those he encountered to look beyond the superficial, to see the human beneath the tattered exterior. The opulent lobby, with its polished marble floors that gleamed like liquid light, its gleaming brass fixtures that reflected the soft, ambient lighting, and the subtle, expensive scent that permeated the air, felt immense and intimidating to the disguised Silas. It was a stark contrast to the stale, damp air that often clung to his temporary havens in this persona, the bus shelters and park benches where he often spent his nights. Guests, impeccably dressed in designer clothes, absorbed in their hushed conversations or scrolling through their phones, barely registered his presence, their gazes sliding over him as if he were part of the furniture. The front desk staff, sharp-eyed and impeccably groomed in their tailored uniforms, offered him only a fleeting, dismissive glance before returning to their screens, their fingers tapping rhythmically on keyboards. This was exactly what he expected, the pervasive invisibility of the marginalized, a phenomenon he had now experienced firsthand, profoundly and painfully. He slowly made his way towards a secluded corner, hoping to blend into the background, to observe without being directly challenged. He settled onto a plush, velvet armchair near a large potted palm, its dark green fronds offering a small measure of concealment. He tried to appear as inconspicuous as possible, his presence meant to be a quiet test, not a confrontation. He simply watched, letting the sounds of polite chatter, the clinking of delicate teacups, and the faint, classical music wash over him. He felt the chill seep into his bones despite the hotel's comfortable temperature, a chill that was more existential than physical, a pervasive cold born of profound disappointment. It wasn't long before Wallace Breen, a figure of imposing authority and impeccable presentation, emerged from his office, his movements precise and self-assured. Wallace, with his hawk-like gaze, a gaze trained to spot imperfections and deviations from his rigid standards, immediately spotted the anomaly in his meticulously ordered sanctuary. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of irritation, then outright disgust, crossing his face. A homeless man, in his lobby? This was an affront, a direct challenge to the exclusive image he so fiercely protected, a blemish on his perfect ledger. Wallace believed that the very presence of someone so undesirable could tarnish the hotel's reputation, like a smudge on a pristine windowpane, a crack in his carefully crafted facade. He prided himself on maintaining an environment where only those of a certain social standing felt comfortable, an elite bubble, and Silas, in his current guise, clearly did not fit that criterion. He was an unauthorized presence, a problem to be eradicated. Wallace marched directly toward Silas, his footsteps echoing ominously on the polished marble floor, each stride a deliberate assertion of his authority. "Excuse him, sir." Wallace's voice was sharp, cutting through the ambient hum, devoid of any genuine civility, a thinly veiled menace. "Is there something he can help you with? This area is reserved exclusively for our hotel guests. This is not a public waiting room." His tone was not an offer of assistance, but a thinly veiled command to leave, an order delivered with an air of absolute finality. Silas looked up, feigning confusion and a slight tremor in his voice, his eyes widening slightly behind the askew glasses. "Oh, forgive him, sir. He just needed a moment to rest his feet. It's been a long day. A very long day, indeed." He made sure to emphasize the weariness, the vulnerability, hoping to elicit even a flicker of common human decency. Wallace's lips thinned into a hard line, his patience visibly fraying. "Rest his feet? This is a 5-star establishment, sir, not a public park bench, not a municipal shelter. We have a certain clientele, a certain standard, a brand image to uphold. His presence here is disruptive. It is an unsightly distraction. He is afraid he must ask him to leave. Immediately." He didn't bother to lower his voice, ensuring his dismissal was heard by the nearby staff and guests, a public display of his unwavering commitment to maintaining order, to purging any element that threatened his carefully constructed illusion of perfection. His eyes darted around, checking for any signs of disapproval from his staff, or worse, from any potential guests. He saw Silas not as a human being, but as a problem, a statistic, an unsightly blemish on his perfect ledger. Silas sighed, a slow, heavy exhalation that conveyed resignation, a profound weariness. "He understands, sir. Just a moment, please. He's a bit slow these days." He began to push himself up, making the effort seem arduous, his joints creaking audibly, a convincing portrayal of frail old age. He watched Wallace's face closely, searching for any flicker of empathy, any sign of a softening heart, but found only impatience and a growing annoyance, a hardening of the features that spoke of utter indifference. Just then, a young woman emerged from behind the coffee bar, carrying a tray with 2 steaming mugs. Her name was Alara, a barista and lounge attendant, barely in her mid-20s. Her uniform, though crisp, couldn't hide the slight weariness in her posture, the faint shadows under her eyes that spoke of late nights and early mornings, of a life spent balancing multiple responsibilities. Alara, unlike Wallace, saw Silas not as a problem, an inconvenience, but as a person. She had noticed him shuffle in, had seen the way Wallace approached him, and a familiar knot of unease, a prickling of her innate empathy, had formed in her stomach. Alara knew what it was like to struggle. She worked 2 jobs, one here, one at a bustling diner downtown, to support her ailing mother and put herself through night classes, constantly teetering on the edge of financial precariousness. Her own life was a delicate balance of sacrifice and perseverance, and it had instilled in her a profound empathy for anyone who looked like they were having a harder time than she was, anyone in need of a moment of kindness. Alara paused, her gaze falling upon Silas's weary face. She felt a pang of sympathy, a deep resonance with his apparent vulnerability. Without a moment's hesitation, her natural kindness overriding any corporate directive, any fear of reprisal, she deviated from her path. "Excuse him, Mr. Breen," she said, her voice soft but clear, cutting gently through the tension. Is everything all right here? Wallace turned to her, exasperation etched on his face, his jaw tight. Everything is perfectly fine, Elara. Just dealing with an unscheduled visitor. Now, back to your duties. He has already been asked to leave. His tone was a warning, a subtle reminder of the pecking order, of the rigid structure of authority he maintained. But Elara's eyes remained fixed on Silas. She saw the genuine weariness, the quiet dignity that transcended his ragged clothes. Sir, she addressed Silas directly, ignoring Wallace's impatient glare, her voice gentle and sincere. Would you like a warm drink? It's a bit chilly outside today. She has an extra hot chocolate here, it's still warm. She made a slight mistake with an order. She held up one of the mugs, its steam curling invitingly in the air, a beacon of warmth in the cold, grand lobby. She offered it without hesitation, without asking for money, without any expectation of reciprocation. It was a simple act of human decency, born of her own struggles and her innate compassion, a spontaneous gesture of pure, unadulterated kindness. Silas looked at the mug, then at Elara's earnest, hopeful face. A warmth, distinct from the hot chocolate steam, spread through him, a feeling he hadn't realized he was craving. It was a warmth he hadn't felt in years, a genuine, uncomplicated kindness that cut through the layers of his disillusionment, a beacon in the cynical world he had been observing. Oh, that would be very kind of her, young lady, he said, his voice thick with a genuine, unfeigned gratitude, a tremor of emotion he allowed himself to betray. He accepted the mug, his trembling hands closing around its warmth, drawing comfort from the simple ceramic. The simple gesture meant more to him than all his vast fortune, more than all the accolades and power he commanded. It was a validation that not all humanity was lost, that the spark still existed. Wallace Breen's face, however, contorted into an expression of pure fury, a mask of cold rage. His eyes, normally cold and calculating, now burned with outrage, a sense of profound betrayal. Elara. What does she think she is doing? His voice rose, sharp and laced with an almost hysterical disbelief. Is she out of her mind? Giving away hotel property to vagrants? To undesirables? Does she have any idea how that looks? This is a 5-star hotel. This is completely unacceptable. It goes against every single policy they have. This is a gross misuse of company resources and a flagrant disregard for their pristine brand image. He was practically sputtering, his carefully constructed composure shattered by this act of spontaneous kindness, by this perceived act of insubordination. To him, Elara was not just giving away a drink, she was undermining his authority, jeopardizing his profit margins, and staining the pristine image he had worked so hard to cultivate, an image that was his everything. Elara flinched, her shoulders slumping slightly under the weight of his wrath, but she didn't back down entirely. Mr. Breen, he just looked so cold. It's just a hot chocolate. It was extra, she made it by mistake with the milk steamer. Her voice was quiet, but held a note of defiance, a quiet strength that surprised Silas. She knew she was risking her job, her livelihood, but the sight of the old man's gratitude, the warmth in his eyes, solidified her conviction. Some things were simply right, regardless of corporate policy. A mistake? Wallace roared, his voice attracting more attention, drawing curious glances from guests and staff alike. A mistake that costs the company money, Elara. A mistake that compromises their image. This is not a charity, this is a business. And she, young lady, is clearly not cut out for this business. She has demonstrated a complete lack of understanding of their core values and the disciplined approach required in a luxury establishment. Her sentimental outbursts have no place here, no place in a professional environment that demands efficiency and strict adherence to protocol. He took a deep, shaky breath, attempting to regain control, to reassert his crumbling authority. Consider this her final warning, Elara. No, scratch that. Consider this her dismissal. She's fired. Pack her things. Now. Get out of his sight. The words hung heavy in the air, each one a death knell to Elara's hopes. Elara's face went pale, her eyes widening in shock, the hot chocolate mug still in Silas's hand, its warmth now a searing reminder of the price of kindness. Fired, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. But Mr. Breen, she needs this job. Her mother. Her personal circumstances are irrelevant, Elara. Wallace snapped, his ruthlessness now fully unleashed, his eyes devoid of any compassion. This is a professional environment, and she has proven herself unprofessional, undisciplined, and completely unsuitable for the standards they uphold. Get out. He pointed towards the service entrance, his finger rigid with dismissal, a cold, unfeeling gesture. Silas watched the exchange, his eyes fixed on Elara. He saw the despair, the sudden flood of anxiety in her eyes, the crushing weight of her responsibilities, but also the flicker of quiet dignity that refused to entirely break, a resilience that shone through her pain. He saw the true cost of Wallace's heartless pursuit of profit, the human toll of his callousness. It wasn't just a job, it was Elara's lifeline, her mother's future, her only hope for a better life. He felt a surge of cold fury, a resolve solidifying within him that was far more potent than any anger he had felt before, a sense of profound injustice that demanded immediate rectification. This was not just about exposing hypocrisy, it was about rectifying an injustice, about restoring a balance that had been severely skewed by the likes of Wallace Breen. He clutched the warm mug, its heat a poignant reminder of Elara's selfless act. This was the kindness he had been searching for, the very humanity he had sought to rediscover, and it had just cost a good woman everything. It was time for the test to end. It was time for the masks to fall, and for true justice to be served. The next morning, the atmosphere at the Gilded Hearth was tense, a palpable undercurrent of unease rippling through the usually calm corridors. News of Elara's abrupt dismissal had spread quickly among the staff, a grim reminder of Wallace Breen's uncompromising nature, his willingness to sacrifice anyone for the sake of his perceived efficiency. Wallace, oblivious to the quiet resentment simmering beneath the surface, strode through the lobby with an air of self-congratulation, believing he had reaffirmed his authority and purged an undesirable element, a loose cannon. He was preparing for a crucial video conference with the board of Montgomery Holdings, a routine quarterly update, confident in his meticulously prepared reports on increased efficiency and reduced overheads. He envisioned praise, perhaps even a bonus, for his unwavering commitment to the bottom line, for his ruthless dedication to profit. He saw himself as a strategic genius, a rising star. Just as Wallace settled into his plush chair in the hotel's executive boardroom, adjusting his tie with a practiced flick and offering a smug smile to his regional associates, a commotion erupted in the lobby below. A sudden hush fell over the assembled staff and a few early guests as a sleek, black limousine, an epitome of understated luxury, a vehicle whose very presence commanded attention, pulled up to the hotel's entrance. Its tinted windows offered no glimpse of its occupant, adding to the growing sense of mystery, to the almost cinematic tension building in the air. Wallace, annoyed by the unexpected disruption, rose to peer out the window, his brow furrowed in irritation. Who on earth is that? They weren't expecting any VIP arrivals today, he muttered, irritation lacing his voice, already anticipating a complaint about a delayed schedule. He watched, slightly perturbed, as a sharply dressed chauffeur emerged, his uniform immaculate, and held open the rear door with a deferential bow, a gesture reserved for only the most significant of personages. From the opulent interior of the limousine, a figure emerged. It was an elderly man, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that exuded quiet power, its fabric shimmering subtly in the morning light. His silver hair was neatly combed, swept back from a distinguished forehead, his beard immaculately trimmed, and his posture was ramrod straight, radiating an undeniable aura of authority, a natural majesty. He carried himself with the deliberate confidence of someone accustomed to commanding respect, to being obeyed without question. He looked around the lobby, his gaze sweeping over the polished floors, the gleaming fixtures, and finally, settling on the faces of the staff and guests, each one a silent study. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, seemed to miss nothing, to absorb every detail, every nuance of the environment. A collective gasp rippled through the lobby as recognition dawned on a few of the long-serving employees who had been with Montgomery Holdings for decades, older staff members who remembered the founder's earlier days. Whispers began to spread, hushed and incredulous, like wildfire through dry grass. "Is that? No, it can't be. It's him. It's Silas Montgomery." The name, spoken in reverent tones, was like an electric current, shocking everyone into stunned silence, a sudden realization of the immense presence among them. Upstairs, Wallace Breen's jaw went slack. His eyes widened in disbelief, his smug expression replaced by a growing horror, a cold dread that began to seep into his very bones. He recognized the man. Not the disheveled old beggar from yesterday, the vagrant he had so contemptuously dismissed, but the legendary magnate whose face graced business magazines, the founder of the very empire he served, the man whose portrait hung in the corporate headquarters. The realization hit him like a physical blow, a punch to the gut. The bold man he had so disdainfully dismissed, the vagrant whose presence he had deemed a stain, was his ultimate boss. The gravity of his actions, the sheer magnitude of his misjudgment, began to dawn on him with crushing force. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead, his meticulously styled hair suddenly plastered to his skin. His stomach churned. Silas Montgomery, with a calm, deliberate stride, walked past the stunned front desk staff, his eyes conveying a subtle warning that ensured their silence, their absolute immobility. He approached a junior manager, a young man who looked as though he might faint from shock, his face ashen, and quietly instructed him to gather all senior staff and managers in the main conference room immediately. His voice, though soft, carried an unshakable command that left no room for defiance, no possibility of questioning. The young manager scrambled, his face pale with shock, his mind racing to comprehend the unfolding drama. Within minutes, the executive boardroom, where Wallace had been preparing for his video conference, was filled with a nervous assembly of managers and department heads, their faces a mixture of confusion and growing apprehension. Wallace stood at the head of the table, attempting to compose himself, his mind racing for an explanation, a defense, any straw to clutch at. He managed a weak, almost pathetic smile as Silas entered, flanked by his legal counsel, a severe-looking man named Mr. Davies, and Eleanor, his trusted assistant, her face as stoic and unreadable as ever. Silas walked to the head of the table, directly opposite Wallace, his gaze unwavering, piercing. He surveyed the room, his eyes lingering for a moment on Wallace, a silent, damning indictment in their depths, a promise of retribution. The air was thick with unspoken tension, the collective anxiety of those who sensed an impending storm, a seismic shift in their corporate landscape. "Good morning, everyone," Silas began, his voice calm, yet resonating with an authority that silenced every rustle and whisper, every nervous cough. "He believes they all know who he is. For those who don't, he is Silas Montgomery, founder of Montgomery Holdings." He paused, letting his words sink in, watching the varying shades of shock and apprehension on the faces before him, observing every subtle reaction. He then turned his full attention to Wallace Breen, his eyes hardening, becoming chips of ice. "Mr. Breen," Silas's voice was now sharp, precise, each word a hammer blow, striking at Wallace's trembling composure. "He believes they had a rather illuminating encounter yesterday. Or perhaps you don't recall?" Wallace's face was a mask of utter panic, his carefully constructed facade utterly shattered. He stammered, "Mr. Montgomery." "Sir. Of course he recalls. He had no idea it was you. He truly apologizes," sir. He mistook you for someone else. A misunderstanding, purely a misunderstanding, he assures you, sir. He would never, ever, treat you with such disrespect, Mr. Montgomery. He was a pathetic figure, his usual arrogance completely stripped away, replaced by a desperate, fawning servility. He tried to bow, to grovel, anything to appease the wrath of the man he had so grievously insulted, the man who held his entire future in his hands. Silas held up a hand, a simple gesture that silenced Wallace's pathetic excuses, his desperate pleas. A misunderstanding, Mr. Breen? Or a profound failure of character? He was here yesterday, in disguise, seeking nothing more than a moment's rest and perhaps a small kindness. And what he witnessed, Mr. Breen, was not a misunderstanding. It was a stark revelation of the values you uphold, and the values you demand from those under your command. It was a testament to the corrosive culture you have fostered within this very establishment. His gaze swept over the other managers, lingering on their uneasy faces. He saw a man, a regional manager of his own company, dismiss an elderly individual with contempt, prioritizing sterile image over basic human decency. And worse, his voice dropped, becoming icier, resonating with a chilling authority. He witnessed that same manager, Mr. Wallace Breen, summarily dismiss a compassionate young employee, Elara, simply because she offered a warm drink in a moment of solace to someone she perceived as being in need, someone who was cold and weary. That act of kindness, Mr. Breen, was punished with immediate termination. Wallace tried to interrupt, but sir, company policy. She was giving away property. It was unprofessional. He was merely upholding the rules, sir. Unprofessional? Silas's voice rose, cutting through Wallace's desperate plea like a scalpel. Unprofessional is valuing profit margins over human empathy. Unprofessional is fostering an environment where kindness is punished and ruthlessness is rewarded. That hot chocolate, Mr. Breen, was a testament to the kind of human decency this company should embody, the very soul it has lost, not something to be condemned and cause for dismissal. That hot chocolate, Mr. Breen, was worth more than every single one of your quarterly profit reports combined. Silas then looked around at the stunned faces in the room, his gaze firm, uncompromising. For too long, he has observed a creeping malaise within Montgomery Holdings. A focus on the superficial, on the bottom line, at the expense of the very human values that should underpin any successful enterprise. He created this company to build, to elevate, to serve, not to dehumanize and oppress, not to become a cold, calculating machine devoid of a heart. He turned back to Wallace, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper that carried absolute authority, a pronouncement of inevitable doom. Mr. Breen, you have utterly failed his test. You have demonstrated a complete lack of the moral compass required to lead in this organization. You embodied everything he has come to despise, everything he sought to purge. Therefore, effective immediately, your employment with Montgomery Holdings is terminated. Not only that, but he has already instructed his legal team to review all your past financial decisions and expense reports, every single transaction, every single approval. He has a feeling they will find numerous irregularities that warrant further investigation, irregularities that he is certain will lead to significant repercussions far beyond mere employment, far beyond the loss of your salary. Wallace's face drained of all color. He swayed slightly, as if struck, as if the air had been knocked from his lungs, the true weight of Silas's words crushing him. His carefully built world, his career, his reputation, all crumbling before his eyes, reduced to dust. He had lost everything, not just his job, but his perceived standing, his very future, all because of his arrogance and callousness, all because he had punished a simple act of human kindness. He could feel the eyes of his colleagues on him, a mixture of shock, schadenfreude, and quiet relief. Silas then turned to Eleanor, his voice regaining its calm, authoritative tone. Eleanor, please ensure Mr. Breen is escorted off the premises. And immediately initiate the transfer of ownership for this establishment. This property, the Gilded Hearth, is no longer part of the General Montgomery Holdings portfolio. It will now operate under a new, separate foundation dedicated to fostering community and human connection, a place where kindness is celebrated, not condemned. And find Alara immediately. He believes she has an important role to play in this new chapter, a role that will redefine what the Gilded Hearth truly stands for. The reveal was complete. The mask had fallen, and with it, the edifice of Wallace Breen's power had shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces, revealing the rotten core beneath. The aftermath of Silas Montgomery's dramatic revelation swept through the Gilded Hearth like a cleansing storm, leaving behind a profound sense of shock, trepidation, and for a select few, an astonishing hope. Wallace Breen's downfall was swift and brutally comprehensive. Stripped of his authority, his face a grotesque mask of disbelief and terror, he was unceremoniously escorted from the premises by silent, unyielding security guards. His protests were pathetic, his pleas for mercy falling on deaf ears, particularly those of Silas's legal team, who already held a thick dossier of his financial misdeeds, compiled meticulously over weeks by Eleanor's diligent staff. The subsequent investigation into Wallace's tenure as regional manager unearthed a disturbing pattern of fraudulent expense reports, illicit kickbacks from suppliers, and a systematic manipulation of profit figures that had enriched him personally at the expense of the company and its employees. His ruthless cost-cutting, once lauded, was now exposed as a thinly veiled cover for his avarice. The initial termination of his employment was quickly followed by legal action. Wallace Breen found himself facing not only the loss of his substantial salary and lucrative bonuses but also criminal charges for embezzlement and fraud. His assets were frozen, his carefully cultivated life of luxury, the lavish apartment, the expensive cars, the designer clothes, evaporated, and his once unassailable reputation was utterly destroyed. He became a pariah in the industry, a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones, the man who had lost everything by punishing kindness and embracing greed. His arrogance, once his greatest strength, had proven to be his most fatal flaw, ultimately leading him to a bleak, solitary existence where the only warmth he found was from the cold bars of a jail cell. The once impeccable suit was replaced by a prison uniform, and the opulent lobby by a cramped, unforgiving cell. Meanwhile, a frantic search for Alara was underway. Silas had personally tasked Eleanor with finding her, emphasizing the urgency and the importance of her well-being. Alara, still reeling from her unjust dismissal, had spent the previous night in a haze of despair. The shock had quickly given way to a crushing anxiety. She had called her mother, trying to sound brave, trying to reassure her, but the tremor in her voice had betrayed her true fear. Her mother's escalating medical bills weighed heavily on her, a constant, nagging burden, and losing the Gilded Hearth job, her primary source of income, felt like an insurmountable blow, a disaster from which she saw no escape. She had returned to her tiny, cramped apartment, the weight of her responsibilities pressing down on her, wondering how she would ever make ends meet, how she would put food on the table and pay for her mother's medication. Sleep had offered no respite, only restless dreams filled with Wallace Breen's sneering face. The knock on her door was unexpected, firm but not aggressive. She opened it cautiously, her heart sinking, fearing it was an eviction notice, or perhaps some official summons related to her misconduct. Instead, she found Eleanor, impeccably dressed and radiating an aura of quiet authority, standing beside a gentleman in a sharp suit, who carried a sleek leather briefcase. "Alara Rodriguez?" Eleanor asked, her voice calm and professional, yet with a hint of something unreadable. Alara nodded, apprehension etched on her face. "Yes, that's her. His name is Eleanor Vance, and this is Mr. Davies, legal counsel for Mr. Silas Montgomery. He would like to speak with her." Alara's mind reeled. Silas Montgomery? The name was legendary, synonymous with vast wealth and power, a figure she knew only from news headlines and corporate memos. What could he possibly want with her, a freshly fired barista, a girl struggling to make ends meet? A million terrifying possibilities raced through her mind. Had she done something else wrong? Was she being sued for that hot chocolate? Was this some elaborate trap? Eleanor, sensing her unease, offered a rare, gentle smile, a warmth that softened her usually stoic features. Please, don't worry. This is not what she thinks. It's good news, Elara. Very good news indeed. Hesitantly, Elara invited them in, leading them into her modest living room, where stacks of textbooks for her night classes vied for space with medical bills on a small, rickety coffee table. The apartment was clean but undeniably sparse, a testament to her constant struggle. Mr. Davies, without preamble, opened his briefcase and produced a thick stack of documents, their official appearance adding to Elara's growing bewilderment. Elara, he began, his voice surprisingly gentle, imbued with a quiet respect. Mr. Montgomery was present yesterday at the Gilded Hearth when she was dismissed. He witnessed everything. He was the man she offered the hot chocolate to. Elara's eyes widened in stunned comprehension. The old man, the one Wallace had so disdainfully shooed away, he was Silas Montgomery? Her mind struggled to reconcile the image of the frail, disheveled figure with the titan of industry, the legendary founder of an empire. The revelation hit her with the force of a physical shock, leaving her breathless. He was deeply moved by her act of kindness, Mr. Davies continued, allowing her a moment to process the astonishing news, and profoundly disturbed by Mr. Breen's reaction and her subsequent dismissal. Mr. Montgomery believes that her compassion and integrity are qualities that are invaluable, qualities he wishes to see cultivated and rewarded, not punished. He believes her actions represented the very soul he wishes to restore to his company. He then laid out the documents on the table, spreading them out for her to see. Mr. Montgomery has immediately reacquired the Gilded Hearth. He is removing it from the main Montgomery Holdings portfolio and establishing it as the flagship property of a new charitable foundation, one focused on community outreach and genuine hospitality, a place where human connection comes first. He wants her, Elara, to be its general manager, to lead this new vision. Elara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes welling with tears. General manager? Her? But, she's just a barista. She doesn't have the experience, she can't possibly. Mr. Montgomery believes she has the most crucial experience of all, a good heart and an innate understanding of what true hospitality means, Eleanor interjected, her smile widening, her eyes reflecting a rare warmth. He will provide her with all the training and resources she needs, the best mentors, the finest education in hospitality management. Beyond that, Elara, Mr. Montgomery is offering her a substantial sum, enough to cover her mother's medical expenses for life, and to ensure she can continue her education without financial burden. Furthermore, he is arranging for a new, fully paid-for apartment for her and her mother, in a safer, more comfortable neighborhood, close to excellent medical facilities, so her mother can receive the best care. Elara felt dizzy, as if the room were spinning. The words washed over her, each one a wave of impossible relief, a promise of a future she had only ever dreamed of in her most desperate moments. A beautiful home, her mother's bills taken care of, her education secured, a dream job she never even dared to imagine. It was too much, too overwhelming, too good to be true. Tears welled in her eyes, tears of shock, gratitude, and an almost unbearable sense of liberation, of burdens lifted. She looked from Eleanor to Mr. Davies, then down at the papers that promised a future now suddenly within her grasp, gifted to her by the very man she had simply offered a warm drink to. It was a complete reversal of fortune, a testament to the unforeseen power of a single, selfless act of kindness. The universe, it seemed, had a way of balancing the scales, sometimes in the most unexpected and dramatic ways, rewarding genuine compassion in ways beyond material calculation. Months later, the Gilded Hearth had undergone a remarkable transformation. While its luxurious facade remained, its soul had been profoundly revitalized. Under Alara's compassionate leadership, the hotel had shed its sterile, profit-obsessed aura and blossomed into a vibrant hub of genuine hospitality and community engagement. The staff, no longer operating under the oppressive scrutiny of Wallace Breen and his relentless metrics, worked with renewed purpose and a palpable sense of warmth, their smiles genuine, their service heartfelt. Alara, supported by an experienced team hand-picked by Silas, quickly adapted to her new role, demonstrating a natural aptitude for leadership and a profound understanding of human resources. She infused every aspect of the hotel's operations with the same empathy and kindness she had shown Silas that fateful day. The Gilded Hearth now regularly offered free meals and temporary shelter to local homeless shelters, hosted vibrant community events, and even established a scholarship fund for aspiring hospitality students from disadvantaged backgrounds, named in honor of Silas Montgomery's vision. Its reputation soared, not just for its luxury, but for its heart, becoming a beacon of ethical business practice. Silas Montgomery, observing from a comfortable distance, felt a profound sense of peace, a quiet satisfaction that transcended all his previous achievements. His experiment, his unorthodox quest for decency, had yielded a precious discovery in Alara. He saw his legacy, not just in the towering buildings that bore his name, the vast financial empire, but in the quiet acts of kindness fostered within the walls of the Gilded Hearth, a place now truly gilded by compassion, by human connection. He continued his occasional, disguised forays into the world, still testing, still observing, but now with a renewed, albeit fragile, hope for humanity, a belief that the spark of good still existed, even in the darkest corners. He had learned that true wealth lay not in the accumulation of material possessions, in the endless pursuit of more, but in the enduring value of human connection and the quiet dignity of a selfless act. Alara, living in her new, beautiful apartment with her now healthy and happy mother, often reflected on the serendipity of it all. Her life, once a relentless struggle against overwhelming odds, had been transformed by a simple, uncalculated act of empathy. She understood, more deeply than ever, that true character was revealed not when the spotlight was on, when grand gestures were expected, but in the shadows, when no one was expected to be watching, when there was no reward to be gained. It was easy to be kind when it served a purpose, when it promised a reward. The real test came when kindness offered no immediate benefit, only the risk of inconvenience or, as in her case, dismissal, the threat of losing everything. The story of Silas Montgomery, Wallace Breen, and Alara Rodriguez became a quiet legend within the industry, a powerful testament to the unpredictable nature of justice and the enduring power of human spirit. It was a stark reminder that the universe, in its own inscrutable way, often ensures that every action, whether driven by greed or by grace, eventually finds its due recompense. For in the end, it is not the grand gestures, nor the carefully constructed facades, that define a person's true worth. It is in the quiet moments of unadulterated kindness, extended without expectation, especially when darkness surrounds, that the brightest and most enduring character truly shines. And it is in these moments that true value is not just measured, but profoundly revealed, often to the astonishment of those who had been too blind to see it. If this story touched your heart, you're in the right place. We share incredible true-to-life tales of unexpected twists, dramatic reveals, and profound life lessons every week. Don't miss out on more inspiring narratives of justice served and kindness rewarded. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you're always the first to know when a new story drops. Now, we want to hear from you. What was the most shocking part of Silas Montgomery's reveal? Have you ever witnessed an act of kindness that changed someone's life, or perhaps a moment where arrogance led to a spectacular downfall? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. We love reading your insights.